everyone. It is Monday. The Zoom link for today's Gaslit Nation Salon at 4 p.m. Eastern is up now on Patreon. Come join us. You can find out how. Just go to patreon.com/gaslit. That's patreon.com/gaslit. Come vent, share what's happening in your neck of the woods. We're all in this together. It's going to take all of us, every single one of us, doing what we can where we are with what we have, and we're going to help each other get through this together. If you want to hear, and I want to highlight, because I think this is important, my remarks from last week's salon, because I still stand by this. So have a listen and join us today, 4 p.m. Eastern, for a discussion with Gaslit Nation listeners from across the country, Canada, Morocco, Great Britain, all over. They are all over. And we come together every Monday at 4 p.m. to vent and fight back against the global war of fascism versus democracy. It is coming for you wherever you live. No one is safe from this. That is just what our eyes and ears are showing us. That is not just me. That is the facts. All right. So see you today, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much. And to our Patreon supporters, the Zoom link is there for you. See you soon. It is the January 12th, 2026 Salon for Gaslit Nation. I want to just get stuff off my chest because I need to, like you, and then I really want to hear from you. So get ready to raise hands. You can do it now. I'm talking whatever works for you, but prepare to jump in as soon as I'm done because I know things are very heavy right now, more than usual. I do want to point out apologies for sending the Zoom link several times today in the mix-up, and thank you to the listeners who flagged that Zoom was producing a really bad link for us for some reason, and I had to correct it, and I was in the middle of doing many different things, including fighting for speech therapy for my kid. You know how that goes to the special needs parents. It's insane. It's insane, right? Everyone's like, I'm working on it. Are you? Like, are you? Because can I come shadow you for a day at work and just see what you're actually anyway, but I'm glad I did that. I'm glad the tech mix-up, I think it was divine goddess intervention because I never do that, first of all, but what I ended up sending again and again to everybody who makes the show possible is, a Nation article saying, "If you want to stop Trump, go after the corporate donors." So if I'm ever going to spam you guys, it's going to be with that statement. If you want to stop Trump, go after the corporate donors because that is everything in terms of the work ahead for every single one of us. And more on that in this conversation and more on that forever on this show. I want to share with you that I am very much in a state of mourning, like I'm sure all of you are. That's why you're here. But I'm feeling a sense of grief that I felt right in November 2016, in the early days when the world turned upside down and it was very clear that Trump won the election with the Kremlin's very illegal help. Like then, I had a hard time crying it out. I could like then, today I can feel the tears sloshing around inside of me. They're there, I feel them, but they don't wanna come out. And so I feel, constipated. My grief feels so I was, trying to listen to some Taylor Swift. I'm like, "Get out." I'm probably gonna take a bath with Epsom salt, but it's there, and I'm walking around with it. I do wanna say in the streets of New York and Brooklyn where I live, a couple blocks from where Maduro is being held, by the way, and I point that out because those damn news helicopters wake me up in the morning now. But the streets of Brooklyn, New York City generally, have never been friendlier. And I think that's from Mamdani's win, beating the same machine that our whole nation is up against, which is just the institutional rot. He had to beat Cuomo twice. It was like a horror movie monster that refused to die. And so everyone in New York is the people are smiling, they're helpful, they're chill, they let you cross the street without mowing you over for the most part. And I just had a former neighbor who lived here forever, who just visited New York, returned on Friday, and she's like, "People are just so nice." She went to all the museums, she went everywhere. She's like, "The New Yorkers are so nice now." And I think it's because we did it. We united. And there's a code, there's a feeling in the city that we can trust each other, that we have each other's backs, that we all voted the right way. We made sure this happened. And that trust, that beauty is in the air in all of the little gestures. And it's electrifying and it's exciting. And I feel like in a sanctuary of hope in being in New York. And I hope you have that where you live. And if you don't, we're all going to work towards building that. And I think it's very important to remind ourselves that when a system becomes so deeply rotted where you don't even know if your election counted, people turn on each other. They cannibalize each other. The whole society becomes very mean because trust is gone. Trust is fraying. You don't know who to trust. So that person who comes into your restaurant that you have to seat, you're going to be rude to them because you just think everything becomes the machine to you. And so with the larger conversation of where I think things are headed, and I want to make 2 points. Number 1 is this. In 1956, which I talk about a lot on the show, because 1956, Martin Luther King Jr. comes on the scene as a young minister, right? Civil rights movement takes off. That's the Third American Revolution. Massive sea change. Captured the whole attention of the world. Um, Across the ocean, protests, students, workers shook the Iron Curtain. Massive protests, most famous the Hungarian Uprising. The debates these kids, these people were having, and I know because my father-in-law, as I've spoken about on the show, was one of them. He's on Wikipedia for getting arrested, trying to lead a student protest in Romania in solidarity with the Hungarian Uprising. And he was arrested, spent 6 years as a political prisoner where he was tortured, raped, all the horrible things that happened. But he continued his resistance as the prison doctor. And the debate he described and the debate you see in all the history books, the students would debate, like, how do we negotiate with the regime for our rights? How do we reform the system? Do we stay? Do we get jobs in the system? Do we just rip it down? That was a big debate, and that split friendships apart. And it persisted until the whole system eventually, the house of cards of the corrupt, aging Soviet regime just collapsed in on itself because it was all hyper-normalization, it was all a facade at the end of the day. And that's where we are in America. That's where we are in America. We've got a big shift happening where states like Oregon and Colorado are no longer swing states. Virginia is no longer a swing state. You have a lot of non-white women all up in the book clubs of American suburbia, and they've got a lot of white women friends, and they all shop together at Home Goods. That's a big shift in America. And you have things are changing, and the American people are getting they don't want their tax dollars going to casual executions by a bunch of lowlifes on the street who are playing, who are basically KKK, right? No one wants that. So, and the system was designed for this. It was inherently designed. We know that. That's an honest assessment of the American Revolution. The American Revolution did some great things, like religious freedom was a very big deal. I just saw the brilliant film that you all must watch, The Testament of Anne Lee. She was extraordinary for the history of feminism. She was like, no sex. Like, thank you. Just kidding. But she was like really, really remarkable as like a very ahead of her time new agey feminist. And I encourage you all to see that movie. And one of the producers on Mr. Jones, my film, made that film happen. She worked on it. And and that film was a reminder. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. The American Revolution was also about religious freedom because the Church of England had their boot in everyone's neck. And so there were some wonderful things about the American Revolution, absolutely, without question. But just like today, just like what we have with the Democratic Party establishment, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer taking money from the same corporate donors that are also funding their opponents, the Republican Party, because of Citizens United and elections being so insanely expensive now, right? They're all feeding from the same trough. You had like the very rich and powerful who were dictating the power structures in order to protect themselves. And of course, one of those the core of that institution was slavery. And the US economy being so deeply agrarian. And and so now we have the Electoral College, we have the Senate, we have a Supreme Court with lifetime appointments, which is unheard of for the rest of the leading democracies in the world. We have some inherent flaws in our system that has allowed this corporatocracy oligarchy with its fascist foot soldiers to come to power. It's not Donald Trump that is driving the seizure of Greenland. It's the makeup magnet. It's Ron Lauder of Estee Lauder makeup. right? When I was a kid, first moved to New York City and I was temping, getting paid $15 an hour, they placed me in Estee Lauder in Manhattan. And so I've seen, like I've seen members of that I've seen, like, inside that beast. It's very glamorous. That Ron Lauder I've seen Ron Lauder in person. That Ron Lauder was like, "Let's go to Greenland," along with Peter Thiel and other American business titans who want a piece of those minerals, those natural resources. Why? Because natural resources create oligarchs. That is exactly what the 1990s in Russia were about. Those oligarchs were fighting over natural resources. It's wealth like you can't even imagine. There's not a book or a film I could write that could put me on, even if it's a bestseller and all that, like, that could put me on the same level financially if I were to get those minerals in Greenland. And guess what? The Trump administration just gave Ron Lauder a minerals deal in Ukraine. So what I'm telling you is the system itself has was designed this way. It's not this isn't an accident. It was designed this way. When you design a system to protect the very institution of slavery, you're ultimately going to get more slavery. And so now here we are fighting for slave wages, juggling even more jobs to survive. And that's a problem across the country. And all these white men who are blaming the brown people and women for this, not looking at like the larger history of it. Because, right? And so what I'm pointing out is this: I don't think they're going to change anytime soon. What ICE, Kristi Noem, they're doubling down on the Nazi rhetoric. They're doubling down on their right to kill people, right? You have even after murdering Renee Good, ICE goons are still threatening protesters and saying, "You don't wanna end up like Renee, I'll go to your house, I'll find you." Like, they are completely emboldened. More people will be killed, and I don't want to say that, but look at what they're unleashing. They're not trying to stop it. They're proud of it. They're doubling down. And if this continues, as it will, because ICE has 75 billion from Trump's big ugly bill for the next 4 years, it's going to the rest of us who have any power at all are going to break away from them some way somehow. I don't know what form that will take. I'm not saying it's going to be a civil war because there's very clever ways to fight back because what no violence, no civil war because once you go down that path, you lose control. And a lot of dark forces take advantage and it becomes like a sadistic bloodbath. No one should ever advocate for that ever. They don't know what they're talking about. Even Orwell said it was the biggest idiots in the Spanish Civil War that were pushing for violence. Nobody wanted the war. But there are other ways to do it, and we're already seeing that emerging. You're seeing states doing interstate compacts with each other for lowering health costs and so on. We could do, like, sister city projects all across the country where we can strengthen bonds between cities and towns. There's a lot of things that we can do to create formal networks of solidarity between each other across commerce, across anything at all to function as strong communities and governance, right? We can do that. We can create even Tim Snyder was like, "We need a shadow government." We're there. So, in the age-old debate of can an evil system be reformed, and I'm telling you, as somebody who has studied decades of authoritarian history, let's just speed things up here and get down to what the answer is and just not even bother with the debate, 'cause groups like us have been here before. This cannot be reformed. This absolutely cannot be reformed, and it was built by design. It was in the founding it's there. You know the history. We suffer with electoral college every damn election and the Senate and so on. And so, yeah, I think America in, the coming decade or so, as we know it, unless we sleepwalk through a revolution, which Martin Luther King warned about. He gave a whole speech saying, "Don't sleep through." He talked about the Rip Van Winkle stories, like, "Don't sleep through a revolution." Unless people sleep through this revolution in the next 10, 15, 20 years, I don't see how America is going to exist as we know it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I love my country deeply. I have all the words to the Hamilton musical memorized. I'm like, "Okay." So it's like, I'm as patriotic as they come. I took my little girls to a 4th of July parade in Virginia and we're all wearing matching dresses. In fact, all the Republicans were like they thought I was one of theirs because that's how cute we you know what I'm saying? So, I'm as patriotic as we come. The first thing my mom saw as a 5-year-old little girl, refugee, was the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor, and now I see it all the time in my neighborhood. Like, I deeply, deeply love this country. I love Walt Whitman. I love the people that made this country great. You know that. You've stayed with me for so long on this show. You've heard all the stories I've told about, like, how amazing, amazing, like, all the heroes throughout history. I don't want this to happen to us, but you know what? If they wanna burn shit down, we're, like, long overdue for a renovation, right? So it's like so I think all of us should sort of, like, embrace our mourning, live with the mourning, but also start accepting the fact that this system is basically self-destructing right now, right? It's like the founding fathers debated among themselves. They knew that there were double bargains. If you read the Hamilton bio, that in Ron Chernow's Hamilton biography, he talks about that. Obviously, it was the devil's bargain establishing Electoral College. They knew Alexander Hamilton, who's one of the biggest badasses in history, that man worked to the bone to federalize our nation. He was extraordinary. And he made that I mean, I understand, like, in his exhaustion, in his need to just get it done, they made that compromise. I understand, and they figured, if it's a republic, if you can keep it, it's up to future generations to amend, to evolve, and but we could go that route, sure. We can fight for some legislation, we could try to amend the Constitution, but something has to happen. Some revolution has to pop off. Like, like that we're at a breaking point right now. So if we don't amend the Constitution, if we don't get some historic legislation to put these demons into a box, contain this threat, then the country will become some, like, EU federation type thing, right? Because eventually, I'm telling you, California, with all the money they bring in and all the radicals in California, I'm from California, New York, right? If Mamdani is just one of a whole larger progressive machine. And I think the biggest question among the progressives that would make such a dream possible is they would not wanna leave behind their brothers and sisters in so-called red states. Nobody wants to do that, right? And so there would have to be some larger network where we are connected in some other ways despite the bad governments, the hostage governments in those states. So I wanted to leave you with one final thing, and then I'm gonna kick it over to you. What's really interesting about this time is the US pulling out with USAID, disastrous, but guess who has stepped in to fill those funding gaps? China. And China, all over the world, the big green giant of China, innovating in solar wind power, innovating in high speed trains, just a massive, massive green moonshot of a country right now. And China has had its own cultural awakening to the climate change. There was a movie that came out that touched on these nerves. I think there was like a mermaid in polluted water or something like that. And the Chinese internet just lit up with sentiments of wanting to be greener. So China is way more advanced in terms of their consciousness and investment into combating the reality of man-made climate change. Yes, they created a lot of factories which have turbocharged wealth and produced a whole generation of Chinese billionaires, and that's polluted the waters and the air and all that stuff. Yes, 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 all true. But they are rapidly, rapidly modernizing to confront these issues, right? Green energy. And they're taking that with them all over the world. They're outsourcing their cheap solar power to all of these developing nations. So as the US is contracting and pulling out, China is spreading the gospel of cleaner, greener energy. And I find that absolutely fascinating. It's almost like, all right, good thing Trump is you know what I mean? Like, good thing. This is actually a weird blessing in disguise. That's not to excuse China, which is very much a dictatorship on war footing. They're getting ready to invade Taiwan. I don't want to be like one of those idiots in my film Mr. Jones, which thought the Soviet Union was the best thing ever because they promised equality between the sexes and birth control and a utopia for workers. And I don't want to get blinded by the fact that, China is a brutal dictatorship. They're carrying out a genocide of the Uyghurs. I just find that dynamic where they do succeed on a humanitarian level, that green energy revolution that they're exporting, fascinating, fascinating. Obviously, Trump unleashing big fossil industry is actually putting more of that stuff out into the environment. But anyway, so I don't want to get down that thread any more than I already have. But those are my thoughts. That's my internal monologue. This is what I live with when you're not around.